that stuff. But I will tell you that we've had a number of these hearings. I think this is maybe the last one, right? This is the last hearing. And I think this country is in good hands with the leadership and the people that we have serving in our military. And I just want to thank you for that before we start this hearing. I'll call this committee meeting to order. Good morning. I want to start by thanking you all for being here. We appreciate the leadership of our nation's National Guard and Reserve forces, and look forward to discussing the FY23 budget priorities with you. As you know, leadership from the Department of Defense and Military Services has already testified before our committee about the evolving China threat and investments being made to modernize the force. We want to learn from you what this means from your perspective, the Guard and Reserve components, who are often the first to be called upon when a crisis occurs. Case in point, service members from the National Guard and Reserves are deployed to the European Command Area of Operations as we speak, or are working remotely to support Ukraine and our NATO allies against Russia's unprovoked war. We look forward to receiving an update on those efforts. The mission to support Ukraine comes on the heels of our National Guard and Reserve forces serving unselfishly during the height of the pandemic in communities all across our nation. However, vaccine refusal rates among Guard and Reserve personnel are among the highest across all of the services. I am concerned about what this means for already lagging end strength and readiness of our Guard and Reserve forces while the nation continues to rely on you to answer the call for service. That's why I want to make sure that the Guard and Reserves are getting their fair share to be set up for success on all fronts. If that's not the case, you can count on this committee to help. Once again, I want to thank each of the witnesses for their testimony upcoming and their service to our country. I especially want to recognize General Scobie for his many years of dedicated service. I want to wish you the best in your future endeavors, and I hope you retire in Montana. With that, I'll turn it over to Senator Shelby.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I welcome all of our witnesses back here, and I thank you for your service. The National Guard and the Reserve serve both our overseas and when disaster strikes, which is often here at home. Over the last few years, they've answered the call on many, many occasions. From responding to COVID-19, hurricanes, and wildfires to safeguarding our border, these men and women have served our country with distinction. I'm deeply concerned, however, that the administration's failure to direct the appropriate resources to the crisis at the southern border has resulted in shifting the burden to the Guard. Because the administration has refused to fund the construction of a comprehensive barrier along the border, it has been compelled to send the National Guard to deal with the consequences. Further, if the administration succeeds in appealing a recent court decision, Title 42 restrictions will end and the demands on the Guard's manpower and resources will only increase. Recently, we've seen as much as $300 million in a single year reprioritized from the Guard to pay for border deployments. That's a lot of money. Now, we're seeing active military components cover most of the bill, which puts a significant and unnecessary strain on the DOD in the year of execution. Regrettably, this was all predictable and avoidable. So today I would like to understand, if you can help us here, how the administration's policies at the border are straining your resources and how the President's budget supports the fundamental requirements of the Guard and the Reserves. I would also like to know whether your respective budgets fall short of providing adequate funding for much-needed equipment, modernization, training, and recruitment. I know that's a lot, but this is the funding committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Shelby. We'll start with you, General Hokanson.
Good morning, Chairman Tester, Vice Chairman Shelby, and esteemed members of the subcommittee. Our senior enlisted leader, Tony Whitehead, and I thank you for the opportunity to represent your National Guard. Today's National Guard would not be possible without your continued investments. It provides the manning, training, and equipment for our primary mission to fight and win our nation's wars, which also makes possible our ability to serve our communities in their times of need. We are more than 440,000 strong, 20% of the joint force, and second in size behind the U.S. Army. Today, over 43,000 National Guard soldiers and airmen are on duty around the globe and here at home. Briefly, I would like to highlight just one of our many missions, the State Partnership Program. Your support of this program has made it invaluable to 93 countries, 45% of those in the world today. One of those partnerships is between the California National Guard and Ukraine. When Russia began its unprovoked invasion of Ukraine, Ukraine's military leaders reached out to people they trusted, people they had known for years, and those were members of the California National Guard. While much of the world underestimated the Ukrainian armed forces' abilities, the National Guard was not surprised because we've been training with them for more than 29 years. In fact, National Guardsmen were some of the last Americans to leave Ukraine. 165 members of the Florida National Guard were deployed to the Joint Multinational Training Group Ukraine mission in Lviv, and today they're continuing to train our Ukrainian partners in Germany. I'm extremely fortunate to represent today's National Guard, a force that is ready to fight and win our nation's wars, ready to serve our communities in their time of need, and ready to work with our partners at every level, from local to international. Again, thank you for your continued support. It allows us to keep our promise to America to be always ready, always there. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, General Hokanson. General Daniels.
Chairman Tester, Ranking Member Shelby, distinguished members of the committee. I'm honored to be here today along with Command Sergeant Major Andrew Lombardo, representing the 200,000 soldiers and civilians of America's Army Reserve. Thank you for the opportunity to testify for your continued support to our soldiers, civilians, families, and their employers. The Army Reserve contributes vital enabling capabilities to fight and win our nation's wars. This includes over half of the total Army's quartermaster, medical, transportation, and civil affairs capabilities. Although the Army Reserve accounts for just 20% of Army personnel, we maintain approximately half the Army's enabling forces and a quarter of its force mobilization capacity, at 6% of the total Army budget. To date, the Army Reserve has mobilized over 4,000 medical professionals, logisticians, engineers, and other enablers to provide relief to our civilian counterparts during this continuing global pandemic. In support of Operation Allies Refuge, an Army Reserve surgical unit provided emergency care to patients wounded in the Hamid Karzai International Airport suicide bombing. Here at home, we quickly mobilized and transformed Fort McCoy, Wisconsin, an Army Reserve installation, into temporary housing and relocation facilities to support over 12,000 Afghan guests. We also activated over 1,000 Army Reservists to support Operation Allies Welcome locations, with some remaining on duty today. In addition to our support to wildland fire and hurricane response, Army Reserve soldiers from the 361st Multi-Role Bridge Company stationed in Georgia conducted emergency bridging operations in Louisiana. This helped create a supply and evacuation corridor to assist communities impacted by Hurricane Ida. The Army Reserve also continues to support every geographic combatant command. Since March of 21, we have mobilized almost 18,000 soldiers in support of global operations. We are also shaping tomorrow by bringing innovation and depth to Army modernization efforts. Our 75th Innovation Command supports Army Futures Command with its link to unique private sector expertise. This diverse talent pipeline was instrumental in the formation and development of the Army's software factory. Yet readiness and modernization are nothing without people. Ready and resilient soldiers, capable leaders, cohesive teams, strong families, and supportive employers are key to our readiness. To that end, we aggressively address harmful behaviors that threaten to undermine our organization. We are building resilient soldiers through tough, realistic training done safely. Sustaining our essential enabling capabilities also requires consistent, adequate, and predictable funding. We are grateful for appropriations that positively impact Army Reserve readiness and modernization, like the National Guard and Reserve Equipping Account. We are deeply appreciative of the additional MILCON funding that you provided, allowing us to replace some of our World War II-era wooden barracks. The future holds many challenges, but today's Army Reserve strives to be the most ready Army Reserve in our nation's history. With your continued support, we will leverage our essential capabilities to meet the needs of the nation and shape the Army Reserve for future warfare. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, General Daniels. Admiral Mustin.
Good morning, Chair Tester, Ranking Member Shelby, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. It's my distinct honor to report to you today, alongside my peer reserve chiefs, on the status and the vision of America's Navy Reserve. First, I'd like to recognize my wife, Kim, whose steadfast support exemplifies the unsung sacrifices of our military spouses. I'd also like to thank the Navy Reserve Force Master Chief Tracy Hunt for his tireless efforts in support of our enlisted reserve sailors. For more than a century, the Navy Reserve has reliably responded in times of peace and times of war. Recently, the Navy Reserve provided nearly 9,000 sailors in response to the coronavirus 19 pandemic and surged hundreds of sailors to support the evolving security crisis in Europe. While indicative of the flexibility and the responsiveness of the force, these activations merely hint at the demands expected of the Navy Reserve in a conflict with a great power maritime competitor. To that end, the Navy Reserve is rapidly transforming to deliver a peerless force, designed, trained, and ready to fight in sustained, multi-domain, high-end warfare. And this is why the singular priority of our Navy Reserve is simple: warfighting readiness. Modernizing reserve equipment, training systems, and mobilization processes is critical to delivering this readiness. To ensure our sailors are ready to activate and serve on day one of any conflict, the reserve force must maintain parity with our active counterparts by operating relevant modern equipment. These efforts are supported by the National Guard and Reserve Equipment Account, which is vital to ensuring the lethality of our reserve equipment. Similarly, procurement of the more capable C-130 Juliet aircraft variant to replace the 3-decade-old legacy C-130 airframes is the Navy Reserve's #1 equipment priority. Last year, Navy Reserve Fleet Logistics Squadrons flew 26,000 hours and moved 24 million pounds of cargo at a cost avoidance of $1 billion. However, the current C-130 fleet is challenged to meet sustained fleet logistics requirements. Modern KC-130 Juliets will realize an additional $200 million in annual transportation cost savings. In addition to equipment modernization, we're leveraging technology advancements to improve and modernize access to training and implementing policies and processes to place the right sailors in the right billets. In concert with these efforts, our adaptive mobilization process, demonstrated during our response to the COVID pandemic, will leverage the Navy Reserve's nationally distributed infrastructure to locally mobilize 50,000 sailors in only 30 days, rapidly and at scale. Our reserve sailors are vital to our enduring warfighting advantage, and we are committed to maintain a culture of excellence and eliminate destructive behaviors, ensuring sailor wellness and fostering a diverse, inclusive culture to enhance the asymmetric advantage of our winning team. I am grateful to the committee's support of our Navy Reserve. Our efforts are made possible by the timely delivery of a fiscal year 23 appropriations bill to provide predictability to our sailors, their families, their employers, and most importantly, to our global combatant commanders. In closing, I remain humbled every day by the commitment and contribution of our 97,000 citizen sailors, 450 civilians, and the supporting families and employers that are your Navy Reserve. I thank you for your support and attention, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Admiral Mustin. General Bellin.
Chairman Tester, Ranking Member Shelby, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today and to testify on behalf of the Commandant of the Marine Corps about your Marine Corps Reserve. I am honored to appear with my fellow Reserve Component Service Chiefs and my senior enlisted leaders, Force Sergeant Major Carlos Ruiz and Command Master Chief Kerry Wessler, who are seated directly behind me. As the Commandant stated 2 weeks ago before this committee, the Marine Corps must be ready to respond to crisis in any climate and place. That is part of our national security. On average, every year, approximately 1/3 of my force activates for exercises or in support of global combatant commands, from no-notice deployments to CENTCOM, INDOPACOM, and EUCOM, to at-home in support of COVID-19 operations, to recruit training in support of both coasts for the recruit depots at Parris Island and San Diego, to operations Allies Welcome here at home for our Afghan partners. There is no timeline or mission that your Marine Corps Reserve will not and cannot answer when called upon. As the Marine Corps approach to global threats continues to evolve, so must the Marine Corps Reserve. This means not only having the right capabilities at the right capacity, but also gaining the right access to our warfighters at the speed of relevance to meet future demands in an increasingly complex global landscape. Our 3-year effort under Force Design 2030, punctuated by the ongoing crisis in Ukraine, has led us to consider whether the current models for authorities and resource funding will allow us to generate, access, and deploy the Marine Corps Reserve at the speed of need required by growing global threats. With the current lack of overseas contingency operations funding, our ability to respond to future contingency scenarios is severely questioned. I would like to work with this committee to explore a new, more modern set of authorities and funding that would enable and empower your Marine Corps Reserve to continue responding to crisis and contingency with increased flexibility. As you are aware, a vitally important component of Force Design 2030 is the Marine Corps Strategy for Talent Management. As part of this evolving strategy, the Marine Corps must continue to leverage the reserve component to recruit and retain and promote diverse warriors who possess unique talents, skills, and perspectives. Talent management, like force design, must succeed in order to ensure that we have the best warrior leaders in place so that we win future battles. As this committee is well aware, Reserve Marines work extraordinarily hard to balance family responsibilities, civilian careers, and education with their military service. They introduce different perspectives to the Marine Corps based on their wide range of backgrounds and experiences. They have chosen to continue to serve honorably, even though many of them have long since fulfilled their initial obligation to the Corps. On a daily basis, they demonstrate extraordinary selflessness and continue to answer their irrational call to serve. I want to thank the committee for your continued support to the National Guard and Reserve Equipment Appropriation. In this coming year, I would like to work with this committee to explore several opportunities to enhance the Marine Corps' littoral maneuver and sustainment capacity by building these capabilities within the Marine Corps Reserve. I believe that leveraging NGRIA funds for this effort can have a direct and immediate impact to our operational and strategic posture. By increasing the flexibility of NGRIA, Congress can help protect our warfighters and prevent strategic risk to mission by ensuring your Reserve Marines remain at the peak of operational readiness. Finally, I echo the sentiments of my fellow Reserve Service Chiefs, and I would actually personally like to thank Ranking Member Shelby for over 60 years of public service, sir. You are a true example of a servant leader. General Scobie, Rich, I want to thank you for everything you've taught me over the last 3 years, and I'm so proud to have served with you. Senator Shelby and General Scobie, on behalf of all the Reserve Marines, we thank you for your service to our nation, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here today and look forward to your questions.
Thank you, General Bellin. General Scobie.
Chairman Tester, Vice Chairman Shelby, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, it is an honor for me to be here on behalf of the men and women of the Air Force Reserve. I am joined today by my Chief Master Sergeant, Tim White, who is the Senior Enlisted Advisor for the Air Force Reserve. As a command team, we are continually amazed at the accomplishments of our Reserve citizen airmen as they rose to meet every challenge that emerged over this past year. The Air Force Reserve provides strategic depth with rapid surge capability across every Air Force Corps mission set. Because we are a predominantly part-time force, we provide ready forces and an exceptional value to our taxpayers. We are accessible as a force, as evidenced by our daily contributions to global joint force operations. We are committed to attracting top talent by fostering a culture of inclusion and where every airman can serve to their fullest potential. Over the past year, we once again proved our ability to rapidly surge and provide capacity on demand. Within 24 hours of notification, Reserve airmen answered the call to help evacuate our most vulnerable allies from Afghanistan. At the same time, we also surged hundreds of airmen to support Afghan evacuees here in the United States. And within 3 weeks, Reserve airmen worked with our interagency partners to provide for the basic needs of over 11,000 evacuees as part of Operation Allies Welcome. With appropriations from this committee, we increased our organizational effectiveness, we enhanced our ability to provide excellent care for our Reserve citizen airmen and their families. Our requested fiscal year 23 budget will ensure that the Air Force Reserve meets the priorities laid out by the National Defense Strategy to succeed against pacing threats. We remain in lockstep with the Secretary of the Air Force's operational imperatives, as well as the Chief of Staff's vision to accelerate change or lose. We request resources from Congress which ready our force to defend our nation. Our Reserve personnel appropriations and operation and maintenance funds drive our readiness. These accounts fund our training, our flying hours, mobilization requirements, equipment maintenance, and our salaries. We are particularly grateful for the additional funding in the fiscal year 22 omnibus to offset increased fuel prices and our facility sustainment, repair, and modernization projects. Achieving total force readiness requires total force investment in both personnel and equipment. We accomplish equipment parity through the National Guard and Reserve equipment appropriations. NGRIA enables us to modernize our gear, sustain our capability, and replace obsolete equipment when we need to recapitalize it. Parity is critical to seamless total force integration and countering those pacing threats outlined in the National Defense Strategy. We remain grateful for these appropriations and cannot overemphasize how vital they are to our readiness. I appreciate your support for INGRIA now and in the future. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today and your steadfast support as we ensure the Air Force Reserve is prepared to defend our great nation. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, General Scobie, and I want to thank you all for your testimony. The first question I have is for all of you, and you can answer it in the order of opening statements. The services are modernizing for near-peer fight, and each has its own set of force structure and investment priorities. What does the focus on China mean for the Guard and Reserve force structure and your investment priorities?
Chairman Tester, Dan Hoganson on behalf of the National Guard. Obviously, when we look at the threats that we face, the biggest thing we want to do is deter that so we do not get into a fight. And by having a modernized, relevant, and capable reserve component to augment our active forces, I think is perhaps one of the best deterrents that we have. Along those lines, we just have to make sure that as we go through the modernization process of all of our services to make sure that our reserve components, particularly the National Guard as the combat reserve of the Army and the Air Force, that our equipment is deployable, it's sustainable, and it's interoperable on the battlefield.
So again, we also, the Army Reserve, look at what that force will be going forward into 2030 and to 2040. And we are working with our Combined Arms Command to look at what capabilities and requirements we need to achieve to be able to sustain multi-domain operations out in the future. So we're looking very closely at information advantage as a capability that we need to develop. And we're also looking at protection formations and what are the implications of those activities across the Army Reserve as we look at those new forces, new structures, new capabilities, and the skills that our personnel need to have. And so we're intimately tied in with those conversations going forward, making sure that we modernize at the same pace as the active component along with their similar structures.
Admiral?
The Navy Reserve is in the midst of a massive transformation, and for the last 2 years, we've been reevaluating every unit and every billet for its relevancy in a great peer or great power competition. What we found was the global war on terror for 20 years resulted in us optimizing for a land war where, as a maritime force, we need to redeploy and rethink about how we apply our reserve force capacity and capability. To that end, we have divested about 8,000 or changed about 8,000 billets from largely administrative or legacy structures to new capabilities that are specifically relevant to what we see in China and Russia. Those areas are maritime operations centers, cyber, space, expeditionary maintenance, and expeditionary logistics. Additionally, we've invested in Navy Special Warfare to grow capability there as well. This is all done not from the Pentagon independently, but in conjunction with discussions with combatant commanders and specifically our four-star fleet commanders to assess their needs specific to the warfighting expectations and operational plans. We're not done. We continue to execute the analysis, the audit, and the assessment of the relative value of every billet, knowing that every sailor is precious. But the key for us and our lens here is how do we maximize the return on investment for the taxpayers to ensure that our sailors are ready and they are ready to contribute on day one if and when they're called upon.
Thank you. General?
Senator, thank you for the question. I think the Marine Corps always looks at these problems through the same lens, lethality and survivability. And based on already the testimony that's preceded me with the Commandant of the Marine Corps through this committee and others, you know that we're repositioning ourselves to be located inside the weapons engagement zones of our adversaries in order to enable the joint and combined force. Well, what does that mean to the reserves? That means that we have to maintain a pacing partner that makes sure that our reserve formations and individual Marines are armed and equipped so that they're just as lethal as the rest of the force. So in this past year, the reserve component has been married up with the 2nd Marine Expeditionary Force and given the specific role of global contingency response. We have an active working MEF that we're partnered with as we design the future force. The second thing I would draw your attention to is, in my opening comment, maneuverability. If you're inside the weapons basket of our adversaries, you have to be able to maneuver. Maneuver to get off our own shots, maneuver to survive, maneuver to sustain, maneuver to CASEVAC, medevac. And I believe that in the future, the reserve component of the Marine Corps could take a lead in converting structure to near coastal, coastal, and riverine maneuverability for strike, survival, and sustainment.
General?
Chairman Tester, I think what you've asked is a key question here, and I would say in the Air Force, we have really endeavored to join as the three components, the reserve with the National Guard and with the active component, to ensure that we're coming up with a force structure that is modern and equipped to meet the needs of the national defense strategy, especially against a pacing threat like China. I think this has been one of the things that we have really worked hard to do. Ensuring the reserve has the strategic depth that we need in order to surge to fight the wars the American people need us to fight has been the key to that. And what we're looking at is what weapon systems will be needed as we go forward, what legacy weapon systems do we need to keep as we're going forward in order to have the capacity we need, and how do we balance those things with the need for modernization. So what we're endeavoring to do is ensure that the force structure that we bring in the Air Force Reserve is synergistic with the other two components to meet those needs.
Senator Shelby.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. General Hokanson, as migrant numbers are increasing, the Department of Homeland Security recently requested even more manpower and resources from DOD to fill capability gaps at the southwest border. You're very familiar with this. What risk are you assuming in your equipment, your training, and operations as you provide this support for DHS?
Vice Chairman Shelby, when we look at the National Guard presence on the southwest border, we were able to reduce those on Title 10 from 3,000 last year to 2,500 this year. And then, of course, there's a separate Operation Lone Star by the state of Texas, which has just about 6,000. So the concern that we always have there is this does add purse tempo to our personnel, and also as a primary law enforcement function, it does have an impact on the readiness of our forces.
There have been many references in the news about the border mission causing extremely low morale in the service members in the Guard, and there are reports of an increase in suicide among Guardsmen. What's the Guard's assessment of this, if you've done this, and what is the Guard planning to do to address this problem? Because it's becoming a problem.
Vice Chairman.
Stress, I guess, I'm supposed.
Yeah. Vice Chairman Shelby, so for the soldiers on the southwest border under Title 10, they fall under U.S. Northern Command, as you know. And so we work very closely with U.S. Northern Command anytime we hear instances of low morale or concerns with those units. And we work with that headquarters basically to adjudicate those. And we also encourage our adjutants general that have soldiers along the border to go visit them and identify firsthand any additional resources that they can provide or that they may need, and then to make sure that NORTHCOM is aware of that so that they can provide those. With respect to Operation Lone Star, I'd really have to defer to the state of Texas as it falls under the governor there. But obviously, sir, I'm very concerned about the morale of every single one of our soldiers and airmen, and we will do everything we can at the national level to support any needs that they have.
Thank you. I'll propound this to all of you. The Guard and Reserves are often the last service components to field new equipment platforms, and you tend to receive less in the President's budget for procurement than others on upgrades. Can each of you identify critical equipment platforms that need urgent upgrades and modernization that are currently unfunded? Also, how do you plan to mitigate any risk associated with budget gaps in these platforms? General, we start with you.
Yeah. Vice Chairman Shelby, if I could pick one field, I would say the fighter fleet that we have in the Air National Guard. We've got 6 squadrons of F-15 C&Ds which need to be replaced, and 7 squadrons of the pre-block F-16s, the older ones. In the National Guard, we have 25 fighter squadrons, and I think our nation needs every single one of those. So it's important that we identify really a way forward to recapitalize those fleets with newer aircraft so they can continue to provide really 30% of the Air Force's air capability.
And the next generation, too, right?
Yes, sir, absolutely. When we look at the future threat environment, we want to make sure that, number one, we can meet everything we're being asked to do, but then we can also operate on that battlefield successfully to fight and win.
General Daniels, you.
I would say that there are 3 key capabilities that we would seek additional funding, and that would be for mission command or communication systems to ensure interoperability with the active component and the Guard. Our next need would be what we call field logistics or liquid logistics. So that would be fuel handlers and/or water purification systems. And then the third capability would be in tactical vehicles.
What about the Corps, sir?
So I think to answer your question, I would have to say, I mean, thinking about what our actual priorities are, which is the individual sons and daughters, moms and dads that make up the Corps. So the very first priority would have to be individual combat equipment, which is the very body armor that they wear on their body, their night vision, all the things that make them survivable and effective as individual warriors. The platforms that they will man are important too, but that's got to be the priority. As far as new capabilities, back to my previous statement, I think coastal, near coastal, and riverine maneuver platforms, small craft.
Admiral, what about the Navy?
Without question, my number one priority is the recapitalization of our C-130 fleet. On average, the aircraft that we have in theater now.
Tell us how important that for the committee. How important is that?
There is no active duty counterpart to what we do in the Reserve Force. So that's our intra-theater lift. So certainly working with the Air National Guard, the Air Force, we're able to get from CONUS into theater, whether that's in the EUCOM area or Indo-PACOM. Once there, however, transition to strike groups and distributed U.S. Navy assets are impossible without C-130s. And so we've got C-40s, smaller capability, but if we want to transfer an F-35 engine, we've got to have the C-130s. We've got a robust fleet, 12 squadrons, but they're on average 3 decades old. And so our mission-capable rates are lower, and we struggle to maintain them given that we're the only service, active or reserve, to continue to fly what is called the Tango variant. So that is my number one priority, and the incessant demand from not only our fleet commanders but combatant commanders drives my urgency to recapitalize there. On a related note, however, the Navy Reserve also provides all of the adversary air squadrons, and so I use NAGRIA to modernize our F-5 squadrons and our new F-16s to enable them to do not only low to mid-level threat replication, but also mid to high levels. So those two areas are my primary drivers. And I would offer one final one is we're also recapitalizing now our 40-foot patrol boats, which is our Expeditionary Combat Command capability.
General Scobie, Air Force.
Vice Chairman Shelby, I would say that General Hokanson hit it on the head when he was talking about our legacy systems, especially the F-16. It'll be the same for the Air Force Reserve. We're tied very closely with the Air National Guard when it comes to legacy platforms. But it's also making sure that our C-130Hs are upgraded, and Admiral Mustin said it exactly right. Those are the things that we're trying to do for all of our legacy systems. And we've been very successful using NGRIA for that. And then I say after that, it is ensuring that we are we have parity with the communications suites that we need, tactical data link, and then also our defensive system upgrades. That's where we're going to put our emphasis.
In the area of recruitment and retention, I'll try to be brief. My time's running thin here with the chairman's indulgence. There's a nationwide workforce shortage, as we know, and the services are seeing all-time low recruiting numbers, which we know can affect readiness. It doesn't seem at the moment that incentive pay is doing enough to solve the problem. We've gone through COVID, we've gone through other things. That's a big challenge for you, isn't it, General? How can we help?
Vice Chairman, as you said, it's a very difficult environment now. A lot of competitors for the young men and women that we're trying to bring into our organization are offering a lot of the benefits that historically only we provided. What we have found, however, is there's no replacement for having the right number of recruiters. And coming out of the COVID environment, where after the past 2 years it's been difficult to have face-to-face interactions, we're getting our recruiters back out there. It is a tough environment. The number of folks even eligible to enter the military has decreased over time. And so for us, we're looking at incentivizing our recruiters to do that, but also looking at the right bonuses to bring people in. But most importantly, it's having the right number of recruiters so that they can get out there, identify, and have the conversation.
You got to look for the right people, though, haven't you?
Yes, sir.
Number
Absolutely.
one.
Got to find the right people.
My last question, the state partnership program. I know it's a big priority for it's an unfunded priority for the Guard. Can you tell us how additional funds will be utilized, and can you explain how the program can provide support to Eastern European countries to help with the ongoing conflict in the Ukraine? General, you want?
Yes, Vice Chairman. So when we look at the state partnership program, we do have, I believe, about the right amount of funding. What we do run into is the flexibility, because sometimes if the appropriation comes late, we have to execute it within that fiscal year. And sometimes a lot of the countries that we work with don't have that flexibility because their fiscal year is a little bit different than ours. So any flexibility we could get on that funding to go through the fiscal year to meet the intent of the appropriation that you give us would be extremely beneficial to us and our partners.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to each of you for your testimony this morning and for your service to the country and to all of our members of the military who are here this morning. Thank you very much. General Hokanson, I know you were just at the Air National Guard Base in New Hampshire at Pease, and we very much appreciated your visit. I don't know if this issue came up, but it certainly came up in the community. You're probably aware, the former Pease Air Force Base had a lot of PFAS contamination. The Air Force, General Scobie and General Hokanson, has been very good in working with the community of Portsmouth to address that PFAS. But I'm troubled because we put a provision in the defense bill last year that has been interpreted by the Department of Defense to limit the disclosure that they provide to communities about PFAS contamination. And I don't believe that was the intent of the committee when we passed that, and it's created real concerns for the community. Do you have any idea when DOD is going to issue guidance about what's going to be allowed with respect to disclosure?
Senator Shaheen, not specifically. I know with respect to Pease, the Air Force BRAC office is working that, and I know they're in the investigative phase right now. The concern that we have within the National Guard specifically is we need access to the DERB funding, the emergency response funds, because if we don't have that, then it causes us to utilize our operations and maintenance funding, which has a significant impact on our readiness. So we obviously want to work very closely with the Air Force on this to ensure that we're good neighbors to our communities, and we'll continue to follow up with that, particularly related to Pease Air Force Base.
Thank you. I think that the transparency piece is really important also to reassure communities that are affected that so that they don't lose trust in their military partners on those bases. Thank you. One of the things I think you may also have heard when you were at Pease was the partnership that they have with Delta Airlines with respect to the KC-46 and maintenance. Can you talk about why that's helpful and whether that has any potential to serve as a model for other Guard bases or other efforts to address the challenges with the KC-46?
So, ma'am, anytime we can partner with industry and our partners actually within the state, it benefits both of our organizations. Particularly to Pease, when you look at the civilian support for some of our aviators that fly at the KC-46 and also with the airlines, it gives them a great benefit, and also we can learn from each other. And so in many cases, when we're operating the same platforms, in this case, it benefits both of us, and we want to work together whenever we can because I think it makes us both better.
Thank you. Admiral Mustin, you talked about the importance of budget certainty. I think you also mentioned that, General Scobie, in your remarks. Can you talk about the challenges that it creates for you, Admiral Mustin, and I'm going to ask each of you to respond to this, when you don't know what's going to happen with the budget and you're not sure about your appropriation?
Yes, Senator, thank you for the great question. The reality is, like each of the other components, we wrestle with the unknown as it relates to predictable funding. So we create what we believe to be an adequate reflection of the consumption or the obligation of funds, and that's a direct reflection to the operations of our force. When either we operate in a continuing resolution, meaning no new starts, no new contracts, it pressurizes the back half of the year in that we may get a full year's funding with only 6 months to execute. In many cases, it's unexecutable. And so we hate to then show up at the end of the fiscal year and say we've got money that we could not obligate. On the other hand, we want to ensure that we maximize the utility of every dollar available. And we've got many talented citizen sailors who want to do more service. And yet, when we're unable to offer that to them because we have uncertainty with the budget, it results in a lack of readiness for us.
General Scobie, you want to add to that?
Senator, thank you. In addition to what Admiral Mustin said, it is also the fact that we will be out of step with where we've transitioned our force. For instance, every year we try to maximize our force and put the jobs and people in places that the country needs us. So as we go from year to year, they may be, when they should have been technicians, we might have them as traditional reservists and vice versa. So the money is not where it needs to be for execution in that year, and it causes us to slow down either hiring or slow down the ability to get after the missions we're trying to get after.
Thank you. My time is up. I'm sure everybody would like to weigh in on this question, but is it fair to say, and you can just nod your head, that you can't be as effective and as efficient as you would like to be if we can't get our act together here in Congress and get you the budget that you need to operate? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for that question, Senator Shaheen. Senator Moran.
Chairman Tester, thank you. Let me start with General Hokanson. I'm going to try to go quickly. I have no chance for a second round this morning, so I'm going to try to get all my questions in the first round. General Hokanson, we had a conversation last year about this time in this type of hearing, and you expressed support for establishing a cybersecurity pilot program that would partner the National Guard with industry, academia, and state and local government to work on our critical infrastructure. I worked to secure $10 million in the 22 defense appropriations to enable the Guard to implement that pilot program, but it's my understanding that there has been, I would categorize this as little accomplished since then, but could you tell me what the problem is?
Each of our 54 National Guards. We did a pilot a few mission assurance team, and we learned a lot of lessons from that. But what we found is we didn't have the force structure, but we had a small defensive cyber element in each state. So we actually got with U.S. Cybercom to realize how can we best improve and help each of our states with their resiliency. And so we created 4 what are called cyber mission elements, and for lack of a better term, it's the basic building block for all cyber elements that are in the Department of Defense. And we've got 4 states working at that right now. And what we're trying to do is make sure that we have the authorities to utilize that funding in those 4 states to see how they connect with industry and with private organizations also within the state to make sure they can utilize that, but also stay within their authorities. And we're learning a lot as we have in the election support in 2016 and 2018, and we're looking to also do that this year as well. And we're also leveraging what we've learned from our responses to in Louisiana, as an example, to one of the school districts that was hit, and then also some of the counties in Texas as well. So what we're doing is we're learning from what we have, but we want to make sure that we have the authorities to utilize that resourcing for what it was intended to do.
When do you expect that you'd have an understanding of the answer to that?
Well, sir, this is ongoing. We plan to field all 54 by 24, and so I'm hoping that we get that stuff as quickly as possible because we want to make sure every resource that's made available to us that we can actually implement and learn from.
And the resources that were made available to you in the Defense Appropriation Bill of last year, they're still of value to you?
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Again, General Hokanson, it's my understanding that the 8 Army National Guard divisions have the same capabilities as active Army components. However, I recently learned that the National Guard does not have the same amount of divisional intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance assets as the active component, such as the Gray Eagle. It seems to me that those are important assets for, we put our Guard at greater risk in their absence. What can we do to fix this problem? When do you expect the 8 Army National Guard units to receive the MQ-1C Gray Eagle?
Sir, you hit a great point there. Is our Army National Guard divisions, all 8, have to look exactly like their active duty counterparts, so we're interoperable on the battlefield. We're working very closely with the Army on that equipment that is in the active divisions that is currently not in the National Guard. Specifically to the Gray Eagle, there's the Gray Eagle and then the extended range one as well. What we want to make sure is what the Army is planning to go to is incorporated into the National Guard as much as possible so we don't have legacy systems that are outdated. And so we're working very closely with the Army and their acquisition process to make sure whatever the Army is going to look like, the National Guard divisions look exactly the same.
And the Army is supportive of that outcome?
Well, sir, I'd have to look at exactly what their program is, but I know that they have them in their organizations right now, and so that's something that we'll want as long as they have them.
Thank you. General Scobie, I was going to ask you a question, but I don't think I have time, but I would thank you for your service. And I look forward to shaking your hand to express that in a more personal way than across the room. I want to get a final question in. In FY21 NDAA, that bill included language that I introduced with Senator Udall, now Ambassador Udall, called the Mothers of Military Service Leave Act, known as the MOMS Act. It was designed to ensure that women serving in the National Guard and Reserve components can take maternity leave without worrying about negatively impacting the credible military service that they are earning. The law required that this legislation be enacted within 180 days after the enactment of NDAA. I'm told that the Army has issued a policy on this and that none of the other services have. I've asked for an update on implementation and have not received a briefing. My staff has not received a briefing. Can you provide me an update of where your service stands in implementing this? And General Hokanson, have you spoken to Secretary Austin or other services about this? And can you answer why it hasn't been implemented to support the well-being of our female military service members?
Yes, Senator Moran. We have provided input to policy on the implementation of this, and I know that there's a draft out there. We're just waiting for OSD approval so that we can then implement that as quickly as possible.
Let me ask your colleagues at the table where they are on this topic.
Sir, I guess I'll go ahead and start. As always, we are ready to execute orders as soon as they come from the department.
So this is not a branch issue, this is a department issue.
We're simply waiting for the alignment of policy and orders.
I know you're not going to place the burden on anyone. You're waiting. Yes, sir.
So for the Army Reserve, as a part of the Army, we implemented a policy. We took it to OSD, had them bless off on the language. They approved of it, and so we went forward and started to execute.
Thank you.
The Navy is wildly supportive of the MOMS Act, and I appreciate your introduction of that language specifically. We also, however, are waiting for the policy division to approve it. Once approved, the Navy is ready to execute.
Thank you.
Senator Moran, we are in the same boat. Once the OSD policy is approved, we are ready to implement.
I'll change my questioning to a different panel. Thank you.
Senator Baldwin.
Thank you, Chairman Tester. General Hokanson, you stated in your written testimony that over 60,000 Guard members do not have health insurance, and that is roughly 16% of the Guard. In response to questions that Senator Collins and I asked in this subcommittee, the Defense Health Agency is on record agreeing that health care coverage is really a readiness issue for the total force. I'm planning on introducing legislation that would expand TRICARE reserve coverage to all members of the reserve. We could make this happen for less than a 3% increase in funding for the reserve component personnel accounts. Can you explain why this initiative, or can you explain what this initiative would do for the National Guard?
Yes, Senator Baldwin, and thank you for that. When I visit the 54 and visit our states and talk to the family members, one of the most important concerns they have is health care, and especially even more lately as we look at the impacts of inflation. But when I look at what we've asked our Guardsmen and Reservists to do over the last 2 years, you know, we talk about the fight at night force, you got to be able to ready to go. When we look at COVID and our requirement to ask Guardsmen and Reservists to come on duty almost immediately, one of the key things there is they have to be medically ready to do that. And any way that we can ensure all of them have access to preventative care so they're always ready to go, but also mental health care. As we've seen, there's some concerns there as well. Anything we can do to ensure that they have that access and they can afford it, then it's really important. It will make a huge impact to our readiness.
Yes. I'm glad you brought up mental health care. The Wisconsin Guard experienced a tragic string of deaths by suicide last year, which highlighted the need for mental health care in the Guard. This year, I'm requesting an increased funding for the Guard to hire additional mental health providers. What impact would more providers have on mental health readiness in the Guard, and how many providers do we need to guarantee an adequate patient-to-provider ratio?
So, Senator, when we look at our mental health professionals right now, we could use about to double where we're at for a total of about 450. And through our analysis, that would be roughly 2 per wing and 1 per brigade. Where that benefits the force is access. to where our soldiers and airmen know someone that they can go to and they can have those conversations, or it's somebody that can continue to provide information briefs and access or tell people what services are available to them. And we don't ever know what the exact solution is, but the more conversations we have and the more accessible that is, I think it's definitely going to make a difference.
Thank you. General Daniels, I want to commend you and the Army Reserve for your outstanding support to Operation Allies Welcome at Fort McCoy in Wisconsin. I had the opportunity to witness firsthand the great work the men and women of the Army Reserve did in support of our Afghan partners during a visit to Fort McCoy last September. With that mission now complete, do you have the resources you need to restore Fort McCoy facilities back to full operational capacity? And will additional MILCON funding at Fort McCoy this year assist with those efforts?
So thank you for the additional MILCON funding that we received this past year. That will actually help us convert some of those World War II barracks into more modernized training facilities. We have received approval to use the ODACA funds to help us do restoration of our existing facilities that were used, had a lot of wear and tear on them, a lot of throughput, that they were sort of not conditioned to having that volume at that length of time. So any additional funds will continue to modernize those reserve wooden barracks into something more modern, so thank you.
Thank you. And General Hokanson, regarding PFAS remediation, what does the National Guard need in order to get equal access to the Defense Environmental Restoration Program funding, and how can we assist you in that process?
So, Senator Baldwin, the key there is just for us to have the authorities to access that funding. As I mentioned earlier, if we don't have access to that, we have to come up with the funding somewhere. And so we'll have to draw from our readiness accounts, which has a significant impact on our readiness. And really all we're asking for is to be treated the same as everyone else.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
While Senator Hoeven gets set up, I just want to follow up on a question that the ranking member asked. And real quickly, I believe the question was asked about what does your budgets not do adequately? And just to list the first one, Guard was F-16s, Army was communications interoperability. These were just the first ones you listed, several more than that. Marines was body armor, Navy was C-130, Air Force was F-16s again. I just want to go back and revisit this because I think this is really an important point. Is what you're saying is the budget that's being presented today not address those issues adequately?
Chairman Tester, with respect to the Air National Guard, we have identified to the Air Force on their unfunded priority list not only the F-16s but also our F-15 fleet, the need to recapitalize with new airframes all of those squadrons.
Okay.
So the Army's budget is aware and it's tracked over time. We're looking to make that perhaps be a little bit closer to the left than to the right.
Okay.
Chairman, the weapon system sustainment is absolutely the thing that's our top of our unfunded
Yeah.
requests.
Okay.
C-130s are on the Navy's unfunded priority list.
Okay. Gotcha.
And the service is aware of the ice shortfall for the reserves.
Thank you all very much. Senator Hoeven.
Thank you, Chairman. General Hokanson, the MQ-1C Gray Eagle, you and I have talked about it before. It's a mission that you all have to support the military, our Army with that mission, but you don't currently have any of your guardsmen that actually have that system and train on it and operate on it, and we all know how active you are these days in everything we do, and it's just amazing, and you do, of course, an incredible job. So I guess, what about, don't you need to be training on this system if you're going to actually utilize it in combat, which is, in fact, the case?
Yes, Senator Hoeven. So when we look at the 8 divisions in the Army National Guard, our goal is they look exactly like their active component divisions, so they're interoperable on the battlefield or whenever our nation needs them. And as you mentioned, the Gray Eagle is one of the capabilities that currently exists in the active component. We're working very closely with the Army when we look at not only the Gray Eagle, but the extended range version of the Gray Eagle to make sure if the Army acquires more, that we have those integrated in the National Guard divisions as well, because we think it's absolutely important. And so we're working with them very closely to see what decisions are made to make sure that we're part of that process.
But you do need to have that system in the Guard with an established training for it, don't you?
Yes, sir. If the intent is to implement those across the entire Army, we absolutely need those in our formations. And as you said, we need to train in those so that we're ready to use them when they're needed.
Yeah, that's vitally important. That's how we do it with all of our weapon systems, and rightly so. I want to ask you about the MQ-9 Reaper conversion. As you know, we've had that mission at the with the hooligans at Fargo. Our Guard in Fargo shifted from the F-16 to the originally Predator, now Reaper. But I want, given that they have had that mission now for, I lose track, long time. One of the first to get it, maybe the first Guard unit to get it, and they have very good clients. They need the Block 5, so I want to know that you have arrangements to make sure that they continue in the Block 5.
Yes, Senator, we're working very closely with the Air Force to ensure that all of our systems stay current, particularly when you look at the demand for ISR globally. It's very, very important, and so we want to work to make sure that the Air Force modernizes our fleet so we continue to perform those missions that we're being given.
Good. And then you participated in a dynamic force employment exercise in March. Can you tell me what specifically you learned in regard to, and utilized the MQ-9 in that exercise? Tell me how that worked and what you learned from it.
Yes, Senator, I'd have to follow up with the state to see how it actually worked, but I know that the intent all along was that our units are capable of dynamic force employment to show that the Guard readiness levels are the same as their active duty counterparts, and when asked to do those mission sets, we can perform them seamlessly. And so I'll follow up with the Adjutant General Al Dorman to get the after-action review of that.
Thanks, General. Line of communications bridge. We included some language in last year's MILCON appropriations bill in regard to the Guard establishing a dedicated training pipeline for the line of communications bridge. So can you provide me with an update on that?
Senator, I'll have to get back with you on that specific one due to the level of details that need to be provided related to that.
Okay. If you would do that, I'd very much appreciate it. I guess the last issue is just access to mental health counselors for Guardsmen and reservists. And that, I'd start with you, General, but anybody that wants to kind of weigh in on that one in terms of what you're doing in that area.
Yes, Senator, that's very important to us. And when we look at where we are today, our desire would be to basically double it to about 450 mental health professionals across our formations, which we feel would be a good way to provide access to all of our both Army and Air Guardsmen, because we think anytime we have a greater opportunity for them to have someone to go to, also to inform them and make them aware of what systems and what programs are available to help them, I think it, we don't know how big of a difference it'll make, but I'm sure it will make a difference.
Yeah, and anyone else that wanted to?
If I could jump in, the Army Reserve is very concerned about this. And so, in fact, my husband and I are hosting a family programs town hall tomorrow night to outreach to the families to make sure that they're involved and they know how to access these resources as well. Because once you get the families and the spouses, they know how to get to those resources, that tends to help them open up and provide those opportunities. We've got a number of different groups that are going to come in and give a 5-10 minute presentation, do some Q&A, and talk about a number of different resources that are available at no cost to the service members.
Yeah, pulling in the spouse is a really good idea.
We also, in the Navy Reserve, have taken on a social media campaign to educate families as well as service members, with the intent being that they're often the ones who need or can access those benefits. And Lieutenant General Bellin and I both are the beneficiaries of something called the Psychological Health Outreach Program, PHOP, which is Navy and Marine Corps Reserve centric, that has had wonderful results, just both in terms of education and advocacy.
Good. Thanks to all of you for your service. Very much appreciated. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'm in business now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and we appreciate you all being here and all you represent. It's always a pleasure to visit with you as we talk about military construction issues and things like that, which is dramatically underfunded, which we're working hard to fix with your all's help. But Lieutenant General Daniels, In a recent article you wrote called Changing Culture, you stated that company commanders are reporting they spend 1 or 2 nights per week briefing metrics to higher headquarters, which can overburden these soldiers with needless requirements that take away from spending time with family and employers. Can you tell us how this is impacting recruitment and retention?
This is a great retention tool because I've essentially provided top cover for all of my soldiers, all of my units, all of my formations, and said, this is what I care about. And it's about readiness. It's about going out and conducting tough, realistic training done safely. And it's not about all the admin statistics. So go do those training, go do those events, go do those things while you join the force. You didn't join the force to fill out paperwork. You joined the force to do cool Army training. So by providing this paper, I've made it very clear what my intent is and what I want leaders to focus on, which is out doing that tough training safely.
So have you got, based on that, and again, I think myself, the committee, that common sense, is with you. Have you got any specific suggestions that we can go forward with or to help you?
I think that at this point, it's a matter of the leaders understanding what the priority is and getting after it and going and doing that training, getting the equipment out and using it, trains the user as well as then the maintainer who has that opportunity to fix it after it's been used. So that's where we get after. We may have a slight increase in maintenance requirements because we're using the equipment more often, but perhaps not because it's now being used as frequently as it probably should and staying, lubricated. So we'll monitor that budget as well.
Very good. During the Army's budget hearing, it was highlighted that the Army fell short of its in-strength goals by roughly 12,000 soldiers. Understanding the need to maintain an adequate level of readily deployable and capable ground forces to meet priorities outlined in the National Defense Strategy, it's crucial, in being crucial in deterring our adversaries. General Daniels, has the active duty Army engaged with the reserve component to fill some of these gaps in personnel, and where do you see the reserves being the most beneficial in supporting the Army's overall mission?
So we have been asked to help augment the Mission 100 up in Alaska by providing a number of chaplains, assistants, religious affairs specialists, behavioral health specialists, because those are very much capabilities that the bulk of them reside in the Army Reserve. So we're helping out on that front.
Very good.
But other than that, we have not seen a capability or a demand signal for additional forces.
Okay, thank you. Lieutenant General Scobie, duty status reform is an initiative that seeks to streamline and simplify the activation and the utilization of reserve component members. The current construct is based on outdated statutory authorities that are decades old. How would duty status reform legislation positively impact the Air Force Reserve, and what impact would this type of transition have on readiness?
Senator Bozeman, it is incredibly important that we do this. Currently, there are 27 different statuses that all of our soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen serve in. And what duty status reform is going to reduce that down to 4. And I can give you a perfect example. In 2008, when I deployed, from the time I was activated, mobilized, deployed, reintegrated, and demobilized, I went through 3 different healthcare providers in order to go through each of those statuses. And some of my family members were dropped out of the ability to do it. So it's really important that we streamline this capability to keep everybody in a status that best suits their needs. And to answer your question directly, it is about readiness. It's about resiliency for our airmen, and it's about taking care of all of our service members and their families. It goes across every branch and every component. That's what we need.
Good, thank you, that's very helpful. Hopefully, Mr. Chairman, you and we can work with you and Senator Shelby on, some of these, again, common sense things that these aren't things that cost money. These are things that save money and would dramatically make things more efficient. So
I appreciate your Arkansas common sense, Senator Bozeman. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Look, I thank you folks for being here today. I really appreciate your testimony. The senators may submit additional questions, and we would just ask you to respond to them in a reasonable amount of time. This Defense Committee will reconvene on Tuesday, June 14th at 10 a.m. for a classified hearing from the intelligence community. With that, once again, thank you. Thanks to all the folks behind you and the folks you represent. This committee stands in recess.